There are years that test everything. Not the ordinary, difficult years, the ones that are hard in the ways life is predictably hard, the ones you navigate with effort and patience and the knowledge that they will pass. But the years that go after something more fundamental, the years that dismantle not just what you have, but what you believed about how life would go. And in those years, the ordinary sources of stability, the routines, the professional achievements, the comfortable certainties, are not enough. You need something that goes deeper than what you have built. Something that holds when everything else is shifting. Doris Day had a career that was almost entirely built on warmth and brightness. The voice, full, clear, uncomplicated in a way that felt like sunlight, and the persona to match. The films she made in the 1950s and 60s painted a picture of someone for whom life, even when complicated, arrived at a right answer. Someone whose fundamental optimism was never quite shaken. Someone who believed, at the level of basic orientation, that things would be all right. And for audiences navigating their own difficulties, that quality was sustaining. A regular reminder that ease and warmth and the basic all-rightness of life were possible, real, worth returning to. What the films didn't show, what the image carefully kept at the edges, was the years of real difficulty that ran alongside the career. Marriages that began with genuine feeling and ended in damage. A final husband who was also her manager and who, she discovered after his death, had spent years managing her finances in ways that left her with debts instead of the security she had expected. Years of working not from abundance but from necessity, from the need to keep. Working to pay obligations she hadn't known existed. Loss. Financial stress. The particular disorientation of discovering that someone you trusted had not been what you thought. These were real, and they arrived in the years when she was also losing the professional momentum that had, for a long time, provided structure and purpose. She talked, in interviews in her later years, about what had held her through those times. Not cheerfully. Not in the voice of someone for whom faith is uncomplicated and pain is quickly resolved, but honestly, with the particular directness that comes from having actually been through something and emerged with your own account of how you got through. She said that her faith, the quiet, private, interior belief that the world had a kind of order in it, that there was something undergirding all of it that was greater and more permanent than the circumstances, had been what held her when nothing else could. Not a dramatic faith. She was not describing the kind that transforms suffering into something easily bearable. She was describing something quieter than that, the practice of returning to something stable, of finding, in the middle of the difficulty, a place to rest that was not dependent on the circumstances improving, a ground that did not shift even when everything above it was shifting. She returned to it repeatedly, in the mornings that were hard, in the moments when the financial reality felt overwhelming, in the grief. She came back to that ground, and from it she could continue. Maybe you understand that kind of faith. Maybe you have something you return to, not as a solution to the difficulty, but as a place to rest within it. something that does not depend on things going well. Something that holds, even when the things you have built are being dismantled. A ground that does not require good circumstances to be the ground. That is faith in its most essential form. Not a belief that removes difficulty, not a certainty that resolves pain or guarantees outcomes, but something that holds you through the not knowing, through the years when you cannot see clearly how things will resolve, when the path forward is genuinely unclear, when the ordinary sources of stability are not enough. Something to come back to, something that says, you are not, underneath everything, alone. That the world, at its deepest level, is not against you. That there is something that holds, even when everything you can see is in motion. Doris Day's faith took a specific form for her. One, shaped by her own history and her own experience of what had and hadn't held. Your faith may take a different form. It might be the same tradition, or a different one, or something less formal, a sense of the world's fundamental order, a trust in the capacity of love to persist through difficulty, a belief that what you have given has meaning that extends beyond what you can see. The specific form is less important than the quality it provides. The ground that holds, the place to return to, the thing that does not depend on circumstances to be what it is. Doris Day kept working into her later years, not always in the original medium, but in the causes that mattered to her. She became one of the most devoted advocates for animal welfare in the country, pouring her energy and her resources into work she believed in. And the people who knew her in those years described the same quality they had always seen in her. Not the uncomplicated brightness of the films, but something more genuine. A warmth that had been tested and had held. A kindness that had not been diminished by the years of difficulty. A fundamental belief that love, given generously and consistently, without the expectation of return, was the most important thing a life could be organized around. She kept giving it, through everything, because it was, for her, the form her faith took in the world. The practical expression of her belief, not the words of it, the life of it, the daily, repeated, unhurried investment in the welfare of creatures who needed someone to be on their side. She was, fully, for decades, because that was who she was, and who she was had been formed by everything. The warmth she was born with, difficulties that tested it, and the faith that held her through the testing. All of it together produced the particular quality of a woman who, at the end of a long life, could be described by the people who knew her as genuinely kind. Not as a performance, as a fact. What holds you? What do you return to when the ordinary scaffolding of life is not enough? What is the ground beneath the circumstances, the thing that does not move when everything above it is moving? That is worth knowing, worth naming, worth returning to deliberately, rather than only finding it when the difficulty forces you back to it. Doris Day knew what it was for her, and the knowing, the deliberate, practiced returning, was part of what kept the warmth alive through the years that could have diminished it. So take a slow breath and let yourself rest for a moment on whatever ground it is that holds you. Not on the circumstances, not on what is going well or poorly, on the thing beneath, on the belief or the trust or the love that does not depend on conditions to be real. Let it hold you for a moment. It has been there all along, and it will be there through whatever comes next, as it was there for Doris Day, through the decades of difficulty that her smile did not entirely hide, through the grief and the loss and the years of financial strain. Through all of it, the ground held, and she kept giving what she had, all the way to the end. There is something worth adding here, something about the relationship between faith and action that Doris Day's life illustrated very clearly. Because faith, in its most genuine form, is not primarily a set of beliefs held in the mind. It is a practice, a daily return, a repeated turning toward, a habit of coming back to the ground even when the immediate circumstances are pulling you away from it. Doris Day practiced this, not through formal religious observance, though she had a spiritual life she took seriously, through the daily work of being who she believed she was called to be, through the animals she cared for, through the generosity she maintained even when the financial pressure would have justified withholding, through the warmth she kept offering in the ordinary encounters that make up most of a life. That daily practice, that ongoing, unspectacular, genuinely committed way of living in accordance with what you believe most deeply, is, in the end, what faith looks like from the outside. Not the statements of it, the living of it. The choices that accumulate over years into a life that expresses something, that says, "This is what I believe." Not with words alone, with the actual shape of how I have spent my time and my care and my energy. Doris Day's life said something. It said, "Love is the ground. Give it generously. Let it hold you when nothing else does. And give it back to everything that needs it." That was her faith. And it held her, as it holds, in one form or another, all of us who return to it. And the returning is always available. No matter how long it has been since you last found your way to it, no matter how far the difficulty has pulled you from the ground has not moved. It is there when you look for it. It was always there. It will always be there. And in the returning, however quiet, however ordinary, however unremarkable the moment you come back, something settles again. The way it settled for Doris Day in the mornings of the difficult years. The way it can settle for you in any ordinary moment you choose to come back to what holds.